Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. Attacking nuclear power plants is a war crime, according to Article 56 of the Geneva Conventions. But that has not stopped Israel and the United States of America from staging attacks on Iran's nuclear sites. The 12-day Iran-Israel war of 2025 came to an end when the United States dropped bunker-buster bombs on 3 of Iran's nuclear enrichment sites. And in the current war that is threatening to plunge the global economy into a recession, Israel has struck several Iranian nuclear facilities, along with 2 major steel-producing facilities. On the 22nd of March, the Iranian ballistic missiles had targeted the cities of Dimona and Arad in response to an attack on Natanz. Dimona, remember, is where Israel has its nuclear facilities. Now, what is being played with here is nuclear fire. And although Iran does not have a nuclear weapon at the moment, it still has more than 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. And many experts say that this can be used to quickly produce nuclear dirty bombs, whose impact, though not as devastating as a nuclear weapon, is still very formidable. Our next report tells you more. This is the cataclysmic showdown for which Iran had been preparing for over 4 decades. The combined might of the United States of America and Israel raining down fire from the skies. This is the war to decide the new hegemon of West Asia. And it is rewriting the global world order with blood, oil and weapons that cost billions and billions of dollars. The superpowers are also playing with nuclear fire. On the 27th of March, Israel bombed the Iranian uranium enrichment facility in Yazd. The Bushehr nuclear power plant, which is Iran's biggest power generating facility, was also attacked, along with the Khandab heavy water complex in central Iran. Most of Iran's nuclear facilities have been built deep beneath the mountains and underground establishments with reinforced concrete on top, precisely to protect them against any enemy attacks. The United States had to deploy 30,000-pound bunker-busting ammunition to break through the several layers of reinforced concrete to reach at Iran's nuclear sites in 2025. But to strike at nuclear facilities is to play with nuclear fire. The consequences can be catastrophic. And in this war, clearly, all bets seem to be off.
We are acting now, not only to destroy the ballistic missiles and the remaining nuclear programs, very little remains, but also to destroy the industries that enable the production of these programs. And already now, after 20 days, I can tell you, Iran today has no ability to enrich uranium, and it has no ability to produce ballistic missiles. We are continuing to dismantle these capabilities. We will crush them completely, down to dust.
In a tit-for-tat attack, Iran has laid down the terms of engagement in this war. After its Natanz nuclear facility was attacked by the United States and Israel on the 21st of March, Iran immediately struck back at Dimona and Arad. This footage will give you a glimpse of the scale of the destruction Iran could effect at Dimona. The Iranian strike wasn't on the nuclear facility, but the fact that the Iranian missile was able to pierce through what is arguably the most tightly guarded airspace in the world points to the direction this war can take. Dimona is Israel's top-secret nuclear facility, about which Israel has never officially spoken about. Situated in the Negev desert, the Shimon Peres Negev Nuclear Research Center has a heavy water nuclear reactor that became active sometime between 1962 and 64. Israel is said to have developed its first nuclear weapons by 1967, and currently Israel is estimated to have anywhere from 80 to 400 active nuclear weapons. Publicly, Israel maintains its Dimona nuclear plant as meant only for general research purposes into atomic science. But what is abundantly clear is that Dimona is not a civil nuclear power plant, and it does not send any electricity to the Israeli grid. On the 13th of March, the American President Donald Trump said that the US military had heavily bombed targets on Iran's Kharg island and had further threatened to hit the island's oil infrastructure. Now, the announcement shot the small island, about one-third the size of Manhattan, into global prominence. Reportedly, the Trump administration is now considering plans to occupy or blockade the island in a bid to pressure Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which is one of the world's most important shipping channels. Which brings us to the all-important question: why does the United States have this small but vital island in the northern Gulf in its sights? Our next report tells you more.
A small rocky outcrop roughly 6 kilometers long and 3 kilometers wide, Kharg Island, located barely 25 kilometers off the coast of Iran, despite its small size, is one of the most critical pieces of Iran's energy infrastructure. As much as 90% of Iran's crude oil comes through a terminal on the island, transported through pipes from the mainland. From here, large tankers pick up the oil, come back down the Gulf and out the Strait of Hormuz to China, which is the main buyer of Iranian oil. Kharg Island, a terminal for the export of Iranian oil, provides a major source of revenue for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. Any strike on the small but vital island is tantamount to going for Iran's economic jugular vein. On the 13th of March, the American President, Donald Trump, said that the US Central Command had executed one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East and totally obliterated every military target in Iran's crown jewel, Kharg Island. The next day, the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, while commending Trump's action, said that the US-Israeli war on Iran is entering a decisive phase.
The global and regional struggle against Iran, led by US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is ramping up and entering the decisive stretch that will continue as long as necessary. I commend President Trump on the heavy blow that the US military struck last night on the Iranian oil island. This is the appropriate response to the minefields of the Strait of Hormuz and the attempts at extortion by the Iranian terrorist regime.
US CENTCOM too echoed President Trump's line and claimed that the US forces had struck more than 90 Iranian military targets on Kharg Island while preserving the oil infrastructure. Iranian state media reported that no damage was done to the vital island's oil facilities. A former commander of the IRGC opined that the strikes on Kharg Island have not put pressure on Iran, but will adversely affect American and European-linked oil companies.
They think that by striking Kharg or some of the islands, they can put pressure on us. On the contrary, all the pressure will fall on the US and European-linked oil companies. That's why we face no problem in this regard. Even if they were to seize Kharg, we would respond as it is our territory, but in reality, it would not create any obstacle for our oil exports.
Will the United States try to seize Kharg Island and use it as leverage to keep the Strait of Hormuz open? If it happens, the seizure would not only choke off Iran's oil exports, but also provide a platform from which to carry out attacks against the mainland. Reportedly, the US military is preparing to deploy some 2,500 Marines and warships to the region to achieve this objective. On the 19th of March, the US War Secretary, Pete Hegseth, boasted that strikes on Iran's military capabilities on Kharg Island gave the US control over the fate of the country.
Iran knows when you hit Kharg Island and you hit military capabilities on Kharg Island, which is the only thing we hit, we can hold anything at issue. Anything. The United States military controls the fate of that country. Iran has the ability to make the right choices. It should not, going forward, target Arab allies, Arab countries, trying to create pain, the pain that they created themselves.
analysts are of the opinion that taking the island would effectively cut off the IRGC's economic lifeline, affecting its ability to conduct war. But it's a job easier said than done, considering the challenges. Reportedly, in recent weeks, the Islamic Republic has reinforced its defenses on Kharg Island in response to the threat, including deploying additional military personnel and air defenses. A month into the war, Iran has stood defiant in the face of US and Israeli aggression, and any attempt to destroy Kharg Island's infrastructure would only result in a significant escalation of the war.
In a major cause of concern for the Pentagon, the US military reportedly has fired more than 850 Tomahawk cruise missiles in 4 weeks of war with Iran, burning through the precision weapons at a pretty alarming rate, prompting some serious internal discussions. Though the Pentagon does not publicly state as to how many Tomahawks it has at any given point of time, some analysts say that the United States has anywhere from 4,000 to 4,500 Tomahawks in its arsenal, which essentially means that the United States has exhausted roughly about 1/4 of the Tomahawks within a month of the war, with no end in sight. Our next report tells you more.
The Tomahawk cruise missiles, fired from Navy surface warships and submarines, have been a staple of U.S. military attacks since they were first used in combat in 1991 during the Persian Gulf War. Given that only a few hundred are manufactured each year, the global supply is rather limited. On the 28th of February, when the world's mightiest military unleashed a range of weapons and platforms on Iran, it probably didn't factor in the possibility that it might run out of precision weapons in the event of a long, drawn-out war. Close to a month later, as the White House deliberates over a major escalation and the deployment of ground troops in Iran, both the Pentagon and the Congress are faced with a dilemma. Right from day one of Operation Epic Fury, the U.S. military has relied heavily on Tomahawk land attack missile, which is a long-range, precision-guided cruise missile primarily launched from sea platforms for deep strike missions. It is renowned for its ability to hit targets up to 1,000 miles away, including those in heavily defended airspace. This significantly reduces the need to send American pilots into well-defended airspace. Modern Tomahawks have been in service since 2004 and allow U.S. forces to communicate with the missile via satellite. They can strike pre-programmed targets or locate adversaries on the fly through GPS. It also can loiter over a battlefield and has a camera on board capable of relaying battle damage information to commanders. Reportedly, the most recent versions of the missile can cost as much as $3.6 million apiece and require up to 2 years to build. In recent years, they have been purchased in small batches, with just 57 included in last year's budget. In the initial days of the war, on the 5th of March, the U.S. Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, had said that it would be really bad miscalculation for Iranian leaders to assume that the United States cannot sustain its war effort.
Iran is hoping that we cannot sustain this, which is a really bad miscalculation for the IRGC in Iran. If you think you've seen something, just wait. The amount of combat power that's still flowing, that's still coming, that will be able to project over Iran is a multiples of what it currently is right now when you add up our capabilities and those of the Israeli Defense Forces.
But if reports circulating in American media outlets is to be believed, the Trump administration has convened meetings on the issue, inviting executives from numerous defense contractors, including Raytheon, which builds Tomahawks, to the White House. Noteworthy is the fact that in response to Iranian counterattacks across the region, the U.S. military has fired more than 1,000 air defense interceptor missiles, including from the Patriot and Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD systems, which are considered the world's most advanced. Interestingly, the inventory of those weapons, much like Tomahawks, is also limited and not publicly disclosed. It is to be noted that the Pentagon has sought more than $200 billion from Congress to fund the war in Iran, an enormous ask that is already being resisted by lawmakers opposed to the conflict. At a time like this, the rapid depletion of Tomahawks as well as interceptor missiles in the American arsenal is a grave concern the Trump administration didn't anticipate.
The Israeli invasion into Lebanon hasn't garnered as much attention as it should. The Israeli military has said that it wants to take over the Lebanese territory till the Litani River to use it as a buffer zone. And more than 1 million Lebanese people who've been expelled from their homes will not be allowed to return back to their homes till Israel claims northern Israel has been rendered safe again. Israel and Hezbollah had agreed to a US brokered ceasefire in November 2024, which was intended to end more than a year of cross-border exchanges. Since then, repeated Israeli attacks and ceasefire violations have killed more than 1,000 Lebanese people, including 118 children and 40 health workers. A major humanitarian crisis has now taken root because of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Our next report tells you more.
Israel has blown up over 5 major bridges over the Litani River, linking the northern part of Lebanon to the south. Despite the growing international concerns about the ongoing war in West Asia, which began on the 28th of February, Israel's deadly bombardment and the invasion of the Lebanese territory have significantly increased. In a social media post on 26th March, the Israeli army said that their troops from Division 162 would now operate in southern Lebanon, with the aim of expanding a so-called buffer zone in the area. The deployment of these troops comes a day after the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the military planned to create a larger buffer zone in southern Lebanon to push back a missile threat from the Lebanese group Hezbollah. The Israeli military has intensified its attacks on Lebanon after Hezbollah fired rockets towards Israel following the assassination of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in a joint military strike by the United States and Israel on the 28th of February. Since then, the Israeli military has carried out various aerial and ground attacks across Lebanon while issuing mass forced displacement orders for residents of the country. According to the United Nations, more than 1.2 million people have been forced out of their homes since the beginning of March, raising concerns about a mounting humanitarian crisis. At least 1,116 people have been killed and 3,000 others have been wounded in Lebanon as Israeli troops push deeper into the Lebanese territory.
All our businesses were harmed in the first war, and now, in the second war. We're having difficulty transporting goods so that we can get back to continuing our lives. You know, the economic situation in Lebanon is difficult, and we also have customers across Lebanon. The city of Tyre has major companies, and I'm one of the owners of major companies. We lost many things. Yes, we have shops that were completely flattened to the ground, and other shops are still operating. As you can see yourself, you can see the rubble. I have 2 shops there that came down with the building.
These images show rubble-strewn streets and destroyed buildings after overnight Israeli strikes on Beirut, Lebanon's capital.
I heard an explosion and thought it was far, but it turned out to be nearby. We were afraid for our children and loved ones, but thankfully there was no damage.
We have 2-year-old children scared and crying and going through this. We can hear things breaking right now. No one dares to come to Lebanon. We want a government that can bring Lebanon back to what it used to be.
Meanwhile, Hezbollah has promised to continue fighting without limits against what it has described as an enemy that occupies land and continues daily aggression. On Thursday, Hezbollah announced more than 45 military operations against Israel to target the Israeli troops inside Lebanon. Since the beginning of the West Asia War, the Israeli military has lost 3 soldiers in combat in southern Lebanon as Hezbollah refuses to back down. The Israeli military said it had detected 9 waves of incoming missiles in a single day, triggering sirens in central Israel, Jerusalem, Haifa, and some areas of the occupied West Bank. The Lebanese government had vowed to disarm Hezbollah in response to Israel's occupation of Lebanon during the 15-year Lebanese civil war, but so far, the group has refused to discuss the future of its weapons.
While the world's eyes are fixed on the war in West Asia, the Russian onslaught on Ukraine continues unabated. On the 24th of March, in an unusual daytime attack, which killed at least about 3 people and injured dozens more, Russia fired 556 drones during the daytime, following 392 drones overnight, making it the largest aerial attack on Ukraine in a span of 24 hours since the war began. Late on Tuesday evening, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky slammed what he described as Russia's absolute depravity. Ukraine responded the following day by launching almost about 400 drones in the largest reported overnight attack on Russian regions and Crimea. Our next report tells you more.
The raging US-Israeli war on Iran has deflected global attention from the Russia-Ukraine war, which is Europe's biggest conflict since World War II and has entered its 5th year. If the events of the past week are an indication, neither of the sides is easing up, and an emboldened Russia has, in fact, undertaken a major spring offensive. On Tuesday, Russia fired almost 1,000 drones and 34 missiles at Ukraine in one of the war's biggest bombardments. Multiple people were killed, and the UNESCO heritage site of the historic western city of Lviv was severely hit. In what was Russia's biggest ever daytime attacks, 2 people were killed and a maternity hospital damaged in a drone strike on the western city of Ivano-Frankivsk, with another person killed in the central Vinnytsia region. Reportedly, a column of flames was seen rising from a building next to the 17th century St. Andrew's Church and Bernardine Monastery in the city center, which was struck during evening rush hour. It is to be noted that Moscow has typically fired its barrages overnight in the 4-year war, and this renewed Russian assault has come amidst concerns that Ukraine could struggle to repel relentless Russian aerial strikes as its supplies of US air defense systems dwindle amid the war in West Asia. Another fallout of the war in West Asia has been that the 3rd round of US-brokered talks between Moscow and Kyiv aimed at ending Russia's invasion has effectively frozen. The Trump administration had earlier warned that it could turn its back on the conflict if peace efforts come to nothing. On Thursday, Kremlin said that a group of Russian lawmakers was visiting the United States in a bid to help revive ties between Moscow and Washington.
This does not mean that Russia is losing interest in the negotiations. On the contrary, we remain open to dialogue. We are in contact with the Americans, and we expect to hold the next round of talks as soon as circumstances permit.
After a winter of relative calm on the front line, as fields dry out, Russia is gearing up for the summer fighting season. With Russia rejecting Ukraine's offer of a ceasefire, European leaders have accused Putin of stalling in peace efforts while his army tries to capture more Ukrainian land. According to the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, more than 15,000 Ukrainian civilians have been killed in the war. The question is, will the casualties of war, both in Ukraine and Russia, become just another statistic?
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. If you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.